Let us begin with this first session of analytical reasoning. I welcome you all to the first lesson on analytical reasoning AR1. Now, what is analytical reasoning? As we all know, the LSAT-India assesses us to see as to whether we can think clearly like a lawyer or not. Now, analysis has a meaning. As you can see, there is this word lysis within analysis, and lysis means to break. Now, what that suggests is that analysis is a method of trying to understand something by breaking it down, okay? And then thereafter, you look for patterns within the information. This is very important. In the process of analytical reasoning and analysis, you look for patterns within the information, which means you do not go for any external information. You only look at the information that is given to you, and then you try to look for patterns within it after breaking it down. The process of analysis is followed by what is called synthesis. So as we learned, analysis is to break down, synthesis is to join things back. So you had a piece of information, you broke it down in your head to understand it. You looked for patterns and then you join it back. And that is how you make sense, and that's how you gather the meaning through the process of analytical reasoning. Let's see what analytical reasoning in the LSAT-India looks like. So the image that you see here is a screenshot that I have taken from the prep test 1. As you're aware, there are prep tests that are available for you on the LSAT-India website. So if you go there, then you find these prep tests. So this is a screenshot that I have taken from the prep test 1. Let's look at this in a little detail. Alright, so you can see that there are some details that apply to the questions 1 to 5, which means these rules here, they apply commonly to all the questions from 1 to 5. These rules are common. Alright, so these rules are shared by all of the 5 questions from question number 1 to 5. Thereafter, you can see that there are 5 questions, and each of these 5 questions is based on these rules. But there's something very important that you should know. You see, there are sometimes conditions that are given in the beginning of the question. As we saw, that these conditions that are given to you here, these are the conditions that are common. So these conditions are common to all of the questions. However, you'd find that there are some conditions which are given within the question. Take for example question number 1. So it says if the last digit is 1. Now it talks of a condition here. Now this condition is not common. This condition is only for that specific question. So let us say if there's a condition given in question number 1, that will not be carried forward to question number 2. Likewise, if you look at question number 3, it says if the third digit is not 0. Again, this is only for question number 3. Do not carry forward the rules of one question to another. So I hope I made the point clear. The points that are given in the beginning, this is what is common to all of the questions, whereas whatever is given within the question applies only to that question. Do not carry forward these rules. There is one more important point that I want to make. Okay, so you have 35 minutes for a section in the LSAT and you have around 25 questions to solve. What that means is that you have roughly 90 seconds for one question, in fact less than a minute and a half for a question. So now how long should you take to solve a question? Obviously you don't have too much time, which means you should always be looking for some kind of shortcuts and some kind of tricks. Alright, I will be explaining these to you in the videos. I'll be showing you as to how you look for these things. But to give you an idea of how you should be performing, perhaps a question set like this, which has 5 questions, you should attempt to solve that within 10 to 12 minutes. Alright, so if you can solve a set of questions like this within 10 to 12 minutes, then you should be able to get a score of around 90 percentile easily. So you should aim to solve these questions within say 10 minutes. Okay, this will not happen overnight, it will take you practice, but you can build that in a period of 1 week. If you work on the questions in the prep tests, if you watch the videos, you can surely build that within a week. So now that we've understood the pattern and the rules, we'll go ahead and solve this set of questions. Like I said, you can find this question in the prep test 1. Now I have organized these questions in a certain way so that it's more convenient for you to see it on your screens. So what we'll do first is that we'll have a look at these conditions. These are the conditions that are the commonly applicable conditions. We'll have a look at these first, try to get some meaning from it, and then we'll go to the questions thereafter. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try to understand this by your own self. Also, you need to remember that there are many methods to solve this. So your method may be different from mine, and there are multiple right ways of solving the question, so do not bother about that. Okay? So now let's try to make some sense of the directions given in this question. Like I said, make sure you pause the video and try it by yourself first. But now I'm going in solving this for you. So it says that a company employee generates a series of 5-digit product codes. So you make a little diagram like this. It talks of 5-digit product codes and it gives you some rules thereafter. So it says that the codes use the digits 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 and no others. Each digit occurs exactly once in any code, which means that you have only the digits 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and each one of these occurs only once. Then it tells you that the second digit, which means this position, the second position, has a value exactly twice of the first position, which means the second position is twice of the first position. There is one more rule that is given to you. It says that the value of the third digit is less than the fifth digit. What that means is, this is the fifth digit and this is the third digit. So you know now that this is less than this. Now there are a lot of things that you can infer from this little data itself. Let's look at what we can infer by having seen these couple of rules. So let us say we now know that the first and second position have to follow a certain rule, which is that this will have to be twice of the first position. Now given that you have a choice of only 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, what are the possibilities that you can have for these two positions? It's very clear. Either you can have 1 and 2 in the first and second position, either you can have 1 and 2, or the other alternative that you have is that you can have 2 and 4. There is no other possibility. Just try to see, you will find no other possibility. So 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 are the only possibilities for the first two positions. There are a few more things we can infer. We know that this position here has to be less than this position, the fifth position. Now, if this one is less than the fifth position, that means this one cannot be the maximum number. This one cannot be the maximum number. It cannot be the highest number because this has to be less than this. Now, if this has to be less, the highest number is 4, which means we can be sure that this third position cannot be 4. So let me write that down. We know that the third position cannot be 4. Alright. There is one more inference that we can draw. Since we know that this one has to be larger than the third position, it means this cannot be the smallest number. It cannot be the smallest number. It cannot be the minimum number, right? Which means that I can infer from this that this fifth position cannot be 0. So let us write that down. We know that the fifth position cannot be 0. Look at a couple of more things. You can see that 3 cannot feature here. You cannot have 3 in here because you have only these two choices. You can also see that you cannot have 0 in the first two positions, which means that neither of these first two positions can be 0 or 3. And you know that the third position cannot be 4 and the fifth position cannot be 0. Now we'll go ahead and look at the questions individually. So let us start with question number 1. We know the general rules and we must apply those to each of these questions. It says that if the last digit of an acceptable product code is 1, then what can be possible? You see, we knew that these first two positions can either be 1 and 2 or they can be 2 and 4. But if 1 has already been used here, it means 1 cannot be present anywhere else, which surely means that these two cannot be 1 and 2 because 1 has been used here. That means that surely this has to be 2 and 4. And as soon as you do this, you can see that your answer is the option A. It is important for you to remember that these questions will always have a little simple trick that you must always be able to catch. Okay? Let's go to the next question. Okay, take a moment always to solve the question by your own self before you listen to my explanation. That's how you'd be able to improve your own skills. Alright? So I hope you've paused the video and tried it by yourself. Now I'll explain this to you. So as you can see, this question talks about the position. Alright? And then you can see that something about before and something about after. So it talks about which one lies before and which one lies after. Okay? So we'd seen a couple of things. Okay, now let's say we draw our 5 digits. We'd seen that these two positions can either be 1 and 2 or they can be 2 and 4. We knew that 0 and 3 cannot be in these first two positions. Apart from that, we knew that this cannot be 0 and this one cannot be 4. Now with just this much data, let's have a look at the options. And the moment you look at the options, you can see something. If you look at the option C, it's very clear that C is the right answer. Let me tell you why. You see, the number 2 will either appear in the position 1 here, or it will appear in the position 2. You cannot have 2 here. 2 will never go into the last 3 positions, right? Likewise, you know that 3 cannot be in the first 2 positions, which means that 2 has to be here and 3 has to be somewhere here, and therefore 2 will always appear in a position that is before the digit 3. Alright, so make sure you pause the video and solve this by your own self before you listen to my explanation, okay? So, we have a new condition in question 3. What it says is that the third digit is not 0. What that means is that this is not 0. Now there is something that we already know. We know that this position is not 0 because this cannot be the minimum number. We'd seen that already. We'd seen something else. We'd seen that these two positions cannot be 0 and they cannot be 3, which means this position is not 0 and this position is not 0 either. That leaves us with only one possibility for fitting in 0. And now you have a look at the option. What you can see is that the fourth digit of the product code is 0. Now 0 cannot be here, 0 cannot be here, it cannot be here, and therefore option C is the answer. Very simple question. You should always look for these tricks. Use the information that you know. It will take you a little time to start doing these things quickly, but the only way you can learn it is by trying, and it's good to start today. With a little experience, by solving a few questions, you'll be able to spot these tricks very easily. Alright, so make sure you solve the question by your own self before you listen to my explanation. I will not keep repeating this from now on, but it is good for you to always try it by your own self. That's how you will make sense of these videos and that's how you will learn. Alright, so as you can see in question number 4, it talks about the third and the fourth position. So it's talking about the third and the fourth digits. And what it says is that any of the following could be the third and the fourth, except, which means that out of these 4, 3 of them are okay and 1 of them cannot be. So what we do is we take each one of these individually and then we put them inside this and we see whether it is possible or not. Okay, so we take every option individually, feed it into this and see whether it is working or not. Now what is the rule that you should remember? You see, since we are on this side, I think it's good for us to remember the rule that the third digit has to be less than the fifth digit. So this is what we keep in mind. Okay, so let us take option A. Now when I take option A, then I get 0 and 1 here. Now is this acceptable? Let me see. Now if 1 is here, it means you will have 2 and 4 here, and since 2 and 4 have been used here, definitely this has to be 3. Now as you can see, there is no problem with this. The third position is less than the fifth position. You have 2 and 4, So this is completely acceptable, which means that I can conclude that, okay, option A is an acceptable product code, which means it is not my answer because we are looking for the one that is not acceptable. Now let's look at the next option. Let's look at option B. Now according to option B, if I put 3 and 4 here, well, here there's a problem. Try to identify it by your own self. Take a moment and try to look for the problem. The problem is that the third position has to be less than the fifth position, which means that if this is 3, then this should be 4, right? Because 4 is the only number out of our set which is more than 3. But since 4 has already been used here, you cannot use 4 here, which means this is not acceptable, and therefore your answer has to be option B. But just for the sake of confirming our answer, we'll also see the options C and D. All right. So now let me put 1 and 0 here. This is option C. So I put 1 and 0. Okay. Again, since 1 has been used here, you will have to put 2 and 4 here, and then you can put 3 here. This is acceptable. Likewise, now I'll look at option D. Let us say I put 3 and 0 in here. Let us say according to option D, you have 3 and 0 here. Now if this is 3, this will have to be 4, and then this will be 1 and 2. So we've seen that the options C and D are acceptable, only option B is unacceptable, and therefore B is the answer. Now question number 5 is a little difficult, a little tricky, alright? Not very difficult, just slightly difficult. Have a look at the question. The question says, which one of the following must be true? Okay. Now what that means is that out of these 4 options, only one of them is true, and that means 3 others are false. And we need to find out as to which this one option is. This is what the question is. Now, how do you go about solving these questions? For this, I'd like to talk to you about the method of elimination. So whenever you see a question of this kind, where you have to see as to which one of these must be true, we use the method of elimination. I'll explain the method to you. So let us say we take any one of these options. So how we eliminate is that we have 4 options, right? And we need to see as to which one the answer is. So let us say if we can eliminate A as the option. You say that okay, A is not the answer. Then you eliminate C. Then you eliminate D. That means B is the answer. Okay, so you try to eliminate the options, one of them remains, and then you pick that as your answer. Now in this question, let's take for example, let us say we take this rule, we look at the option A. Now each of the options contains a certain fact which according to that option should be true. So option A gives you a fact, option B gives you a certain fact, and so on. So each one of these gives you a certain fact. Let us say we stick to option A. Okay. Now how do I eliminate option A? What is the method by which I eliminate option A? For this, what I do is I try to look for an example. Okay. What kind of example do I look for? If I want to eliminate the option A, that means I'm trying to say that the fact given in option A is not always true. It need not be true, which means I cannot say that it must be true. So I look for an example which goes opposite, which goes contrary, right? Which is contrary or opposite to what is given in that option. And if I can find any such example, then I can eliminate that option. Similarly, if I get the option B, if it gives me a certain fact, what do? I go and I find an example which will eliminate it because that example is contrary. Alright, now let's do this with every option. So now let us try to eliminate the options one by one. I'll start with the option A. Alright, so the option A says that there is exactly one digit between 0 and 1, which means let us say this is 0 and this is 1, or let us say this is 1 and this is 0. According to option A, there will be exactly one gap between them. There is only one space between them. Now if I have to show something contrary to this, if I have to show something opposite to this, what will I show? I will look for an example. Okay, I'll try to look for an example where this gap is not exactly 1, which means that it is either more than 1 or it is less than 1. So now let me see if I can find an example of that kind. So let us go back to now seeing if we can find an example where the gap between 0 and 1 is either more than 1 digit or less than 1 digit. So let me just go back and draw our set of 5 things. I'll put 1 here, I'll put 2 here. Now what I can do is I can put 3 here, I can put 0 here, and I can put 4 here. As you can see in this, the gap between 1 and 0 is more than 1 digit, it's 2 digits, which means I've eliminated the option A. So I know that A is not my answer. So option A has been eliminated. Okay. Now I go to the next option. I go to option B. So after eliminating option A, now we use option B. So according to option B, there is exactly only one digit between the digits 1 and 2, which means that there will be only a gap of 1. So now let me look for an example to go contrary to this. This is very simple. As you know that these two positions can be 1 and 2, which means that between them there is no gap, there is no space, there is no digit between them, which means I have been able to find an example which goes against this rule, which means I can now eliminate option B as well. Now let's go to option C. So after eliminating option A, now we use option B. So according to option B, there is exactly only one digit between the digits 1 and 2, which means that there will be only a gap of 1. So now let me look for an example to go contrary to this. This is very simple. As you know that these two positions can be 1 and 2, which means that between them there is no gap, there is no space, there is no digit between them, which means I have been able to find an example which goes against this rule, which means I can now eliminate option B as well. Now let's go to option C. So when we look at option C, what we can see is that it says that there are at the most 2 digits between 1 and 3. Now what is the meaning of at the most? It means there can either be a gap of 2 digits between 1 and 3, or there will be a gap of 1 digit between 1 and 3, or there will be no gap between 1 and 3. So according to option C, there will either be a gap of 2, a gap of 1, or no gap. Which means if I have to now eliminate this option, it means I will have to find a gap of more than 2. Now given that we have only these 5 positions, the only case where you can have more than 2 is if 1 and 3 are at the extremes, right? That is when you can have a gap of 3. So let us see if I can find an example where 1 and 3 are at the opposite ends. Is that possible? And if that is possible, it means I can eliminate option C as well. So let's explore that. Let us say we now look at this position here. Is it possible for us to have 1 and 3 at the extreme ends? Okay, so let us say you have 1 here. That surely means you have 2 here. Okay, if you have 3 here, the number here has to be less than 3. So I will put 0 here and then I put 4 here. So now this works. This is an acceptable combination, which means I have found an example which can help me eliminate option C as well. So I eliminate option C. So now I'm sure the answer is option D, but just for our confirmation and satisfaction, we'll look at option D and see if we can try to eliminate it. But now we know we will not be able to eliminate option D, but let's give it a try. So although we've already eliminated options A, B, C, let's see what option D says. Okay. Now it says that there can be at the most 2 digits between 2 and 4, which means there can be 2, or there can be 1, or there can be none. So what that means is if I can find a possibility where 2 and 4 are at the extremes, which means there is a gap of 3 between them. So either 2 and 4 like this or 2 and 4 like this. If I can find this, it means that this is an acceptable product code and I can eliminate D. If I can't find it, that would mean that D has to be my answer. So let us see if I can eliminate it. Okay. So now, is it possible for me to have 2 and 4? No, this is not possible, because if 2 is here, then 4 has to be here. So this is not possible. Now I look at the possibility of 4 and 2. Is it possible for me to have 4 here and 2 here? This is also not possible, because if 4 were here, then you needed 8 here, and 8 is not a choice that we have, which means that this is not possible. It is not possible for us to have 2 and 4 at the extreme positions, which means that option D is right, and therefore D is the answer. It is the only option that we could not eliminate. So I hope you understood this method of elimination.